It was just another ordinary morning at Jefferson High, and the students were buzzing with energy as they filed into the math classroom. In the middle of it all, a humble janitor swept the hallway floors, quiet, unnoticed, and often ignored. She was an older black woman with silver hair and kind eyes, someone people saw every day but never truly looked at. That changed the moment she stepped into Mr. Claiborne's class. A well-respected professor, known for his no-nonsense attitude and razor-sharp wit, Mr. Claiborne never missed a chance to show off his intellect. When he spotted the janitor near the doorway, he smirked and challenged her with an advanced math problem written on the board, a problem even his top students struggled with. The class chuckled nervously. No one expected what happened next. With calm confidence, she looked at the equation, paused for just a moment, and solved it faster than anyone in the room could blink. The professor stood frozen. He wasn't just shocked, he was speechless. Who was she? How did she know that? Later that day, at the airport, she stood silently by a flag-draped casket. 2 officers approached her with respect, and the truth about her identity slowly began to unfold. But just when she was about to honor a fallen hero, someone tried to stop her, and that was a big mistake. As the janitor stood quietly near the casket, dressed not in her cleaning uniform, but in a sharp navy blue blazer, the airport terminal seemed to pause. People around her began to take notice, not just of the flag-covered coffin, but of the way the 2 uniformed officers stood at attention beside her. She wasn't just there by chance. She was there with purpose. What most people didn't know, and what Mr. Claiborne never imagined, was that she wasn't always a janitor. Before pushing brooms and emptying trash bins, she had worn a very different kind of uniform. Years ago, she served in the military as a decorated intelligence analyst, with a mind trained for strategy, code, and yes, complex mathematics. The skills she used every day back then were the same ones she quietly kept sharp, solving equations in her head while mopping floors. But she never talked about that part of her life. She didn't need to. The fallen soldier she came to honor. He wasn't just anyone, he was her son. When the airline staff questioned her presence and asked her to step aside, unaware of who she really was, something in the air shifted. The officers flanking her stood taller, and the quiet woman everyone overlooked was about to show them just how wrong they were. The airline supervisor approached with a clipboard in hand, scanning the area like she was in control. "Ma'am, I'm going to need you to step away from the security zone. This area is restricted." Her voice was firm, but not cruel, just unaware. The janitor didn't argue. She simply looked at the 2 officers beside her, who exchanged a glance and then stepped forward. "She's with us," one of them said. "This is Sergeant First Class Elaine Brooks. She's here to receive her son, Staff Sergeant Marcus Brooks. This is her right." The supervisor hesitated, suddenly unsure. She looked again at the woman she had just dismissed, now seeing the medals pinned neatly to the blazer, the straight posture, the quiet strength. But policy was policy, and she stepped aside to call a manager. Around them, people started whispering, eyes shifting between the mother and the soldiers, trying to piece together what was happening. Back at Jefferson High, word of what happened in the classroom had spread. Students were still talking about the moment Mrs. Brooks solved the impossible math problem. Some were inspired, others confused. Mr. Claiborne hadn't returned to class since. One student, curious and moved, started digging through old records. What she found didn't just change how they saw Mrs. Brooks, it uncovered a truth that had been buried beneath years of silence. And the story was far from over. The terminal grew quiet as a manager arrived, looking between the grieving mother, the officers, and the flag-draped casket. "I'm sorry for your loss," he said carefully, "but we have protocols. This area is restricted to military personnel or immediate family with clearance." One of the officers stepped forward again. "She is immediate family, and she's a veteran. Show some respect." Elaine didn't speak. She didn't have to. Her silence said everything. Her eyes stay fixed on the casket, not flinching, not blinking, just holding back years of pain. Around them, travelers began to gather at a distance, watching. Some took off their hats. Others placed hands over their hearts. The weight of the moment was sinking in, but the airline staff still hesitated, trapped between policy and decency. At school, the student who had looked into Mrs. Brooks's past was now staring at her computer screen, stunned. Articles, awards, service records, it was all there. This woman who mopped the floors had once cracked codes that saved lives overseas, and no one at school had ever noticed. No one had asked. Meanwhile, Mr. Claiborne sat in his office, staring at the same math problem on the board. He couldn't stop replaying the moment she solved it. How could someone he had mocked without thought carry so much intelligence, so much pain, and so much dignity? Back at the airport, security was being called in. Something was about to give. The tension in the terminal thickened as two security officers approached, clearly briefed but unsure of what they were walking into. One of them motioned to Elaine. "Ma'am, we understand you're here for the military transfer, but we've been asked to escort you to a different waiting area." The crowd around them murmured louder now, watching closely, sensing something wasn't right. The two military officers stepped between Elaine and security, their voices calm but firm. "She's not going anywhere. Not until her son is honored properly." Just then, a tall man in civilian clothes appeared from the edge of the crowd. He wore a simple jacket, but the insignia on his badge identified him as part of the Department of Defense. No one expected it, least of all the airline staff. He walked straight to Elaine, extended a respectful nod, and said, "Sergeant Brooks, I've been following your case. Your request for full honors was denied by mistake. That changes now." The crowd fell silent. At that same moment, back at Jefferson High, the student digging into Mrs. Brooks's past had taken her findings to the principal, and with her, an old photo. A grainy image from a news article decades ago. It showed a young Elaine in uniform, standing beside a man who looked eerily familiar. It was Mr. Claiborne. But how? And why had he pretended not to know her? Elaine stood still as the man from the Department of Defense turned to the airline staff and spoke with quiet authority. "This woman is not just the mother of a fallen hero, she is a decorated veteran herself. And by federal law, she's entitled to full access and military escort privileges." The airline manager, now clearly rattled, stepped back and nodded. The security officers lowered their hands. The ropes around the casket were gently moved, and Elaine was invited forward, finally allowed to stand beside her son. As she placed her hand on the flag, the terminal fell into complete silence. Even the constant hum of airport announcements seemed to fade. Then came the soft notes of taps, played live by a uniformed butler who had arrived quietly during the standoff. Strangers stood with hands over hearts. Some wiped away tears. What had started as a denied entry ended as a moment of national honor. Back at Jefferson High, the photo the student found was now being passed between teachers and students. The truth was undeniable. Decades ago, Mr. Claiborne and Elaine had worked together in military intelligence. He hadn't forgotten her. He had chosen to hide it. Later that day, he knocked on the janitor's closet door, holding the old photo in shaking hands. Elaine opened the door, saw him, and simply said, "You remembered." But he didn't expect what she said next. "I wasn't solving that problem to impress you. I was solving it to remind myself who I still am." Mr. Claiborne stood there, silent, humbled. The photo trembled slightly in his hands as he searched for the right words, but Elaine had already said everything that needed to be said. For the first time in years, he looked at her not as the janitor, not as someone beneath him, but as the brilliant, strong woman he once admired. He gave a slow nod, then quietly walked away, leaving the photo in her hand. Word of what happened spread quickly through the school and beyond. Students started treating Elaine with a new sense of respect, not just because she had solved a complex math problem, but because of the quiet dignity she carried every single day. The principal invited her to speak during an upcoming assembly. She declined politely, but agreed to let the students hear her story another way, through the young girl who had uncovered her past. At the airport, a tribute was arranged for Marcus Brooks, complete with military honors and a folded flag handed to his mother. As she stood in silence, surrounded by strangers who had become witnesses to her story, one thing was clear. Elaine had never needed recognition to know her worth. But now, the world finally saw her. Sometimes, the strongest people are the ones no one notices, until they remind us who they really are.